Okay, so we're going to get started with your exercise 208. But before I do that, you guys all know Carla in the back. She is officially my TA for this class. So you don't have to wait around for me sitting like this forever. You can wait around for her like this forever, right? So one or the other of us will be around to help you. Carla has been through the class. She knows the ins and outs of all this kind of good stuff. So I think she's a great match, and I'm really excited to have her doing this. And I think it'll help all of you because you'll be able to get unstuck faster and keep working. So if you have any questions, you can direct them to me or to Carla. Okay, so I'm going to start today with exercise 208, which this is kind of a big leap for you guys. This is the first day where you're going to be in charge of building something. And you'll have to figure out, how do you build it? And so I'm not giving you the steps for this is how to do it, though I will go through this is how I would build it. But it doesn't mean that it's the only way to build it or the right way to build it. And so we have to find a way to transition you guys from just following a set of steps into how do I make something that's coming out of my head? And that's the nature of a designer, is you have to be able to, how do I make something that's coming out of my head? So it's not going to be quite from scratch as an object. We're going to do it a little bit more with some guides, but at the same time, you have to figure out the steps that are going forward. So I'm calling this a building component. By building component, I mean something that somebody else makes, a manufacturer makes. Stay away from any kind of organic shaped object or like toilets or things that are really round and swoopy. Right? We're talking basic rectilinear objects to start. We'll get to those kinds of objects. We're going to do pillows and curtains and all that kind of stuff. But for right now, we're going to start with a basic object. So I'm suggesting like a door or a window. That's a relatively simple object to make. You should be able to figure out basic steps to make something along those lines. To make it a little bit more realistic, I'm going to go onto one of the major door and window manufacturers' websites and show you how to get information from them that we can then use in Rhino. Most of these manufacturers at least offer AutoCAD information. Sometimes they offer 3D files. Sometimes they offer Revit files. It depends on what you're working in. For our purposes, we can generally use a 3D file, or we can use an AutoCAD file. The Revit file is not going to do much for us. So when you get to any one of, and I'll go through a couple different manufacturers, and I just picked them at random, Geldwin, Anderson, Pella, and I'll get to Kohler too, as some major manufacturers. Generally, when you get to one of these websites, instead of being a consumer and looking at the pretty pictures, try to find somewhere they're going to say professional or architect and builder resources or something along those lines. And when we get into the in Geldwin here, if we get into the architectural side, generally there'll be a place to find actual information. So let me explore the windows. And if I get into learn more, generally, I just picked a window here. If we get down, let's see here, casement. Yeah, I'm not a robot. Let me see. Well, how nice. It's not giving it to me. Usually you can get to where there's a, let me try Anderson here and see if they'll let me get there. For pros. They change these windows or these websites every time I go do this. So I just want doors. Windows. Here, let me see. See, you guys are finding it faster than I am. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So there's the cat. This is what I was after. Okay. I just needed to go and where to find it. So here's what I was talking about, where we've got a bunch of different information depending on what style of window we were picking from. These are windows and doors. So let's say that I wanted a casement window, for example. I could come over here and I can look at the 2D elevation file. They give me 3 different choices. One is an AutoCAD DWG, a DXF, which is a variant, and a PDF. The most useful one is going to be the DWG. The Revit file really isn't going to help me much, so I'm not going to do that. I'll go ahead and, while we're waiting, I'll download this one as an example. Different websites, you know, here's Pella. You could get into something. Here's for professionals. And somewhere there'll be a link to the AutoCAD drawings. But you don't have to wait and watch me try to find it. But it's there, I promise. The one other thing that I'll point out, I pulled up Kohler as an example, and I'll bring this up a little bit later on in the semester too. Kohler's great because they give us not only the AutoCAD files, which is nice, but they also will pick toilets. They give us 3D. So here's the Kohler. If we come down here to their specs here, right there, we have a SketchUp file and an OBJ. The OBJ will come right into Rhino. So that's convenient for, you know, a toilet or something like that. Looks like they have a 3D Studio file. So they're a very friendly manufacturer in terms of using certain products. Some of them are more friendly than others. I like to point this out because I want you to know what you're looking for. They obviously have AutoCAD drawings of the toilet too, but it's a lot harder to make the toilet. Yeah.
So can Rhino open up SketchUp file?
Rhino can open up a SketchUp file, and it can open up an object file. It probably can open up the 3D Studio file, and it will bring everything in. The only thing you'll be responsible for is the material on it. I should also point out, this is a little bit of a side note, these 3 files are polygonal meshes. So whether it's a 3D Studio file, a SketchUp file, or an object file, it's a triangulated mesh. So the smooth surface of the toilet in this example is made up of little triangles that are faceted. So it's not as smooth as if you made it in Rhino. We will talk about how do you smooth it out and make it look smoother. But for our purposes, this is certainly close enough for a rendering. Did you have another question?
Yes, sir. So they do this in order for architects to do different houses with the product?
Right. So these manufacturers would love for the architect or the interior designer to pick their product and put it in. And if you're thinking about, you know, showing a design or something to a client, and you're picking between a Kohler toilet and an American Standard toilet, if you can show them this is what the Kohler toilet's going to look like in your rendering, they're more likely to buy that thing. So the manufacturers are essentially trying to give you this content because they want you to use their product. Could you pick a generic toilet and your client would probably be happy? Sure. You know, I mean, I don't know how uptight people are about their toilet choices. I mean, generally you accept whatever the toilet is that's available at the time it's necessary. So, but some people get really finicky about certain things. You know, you guys are going to get me off on a total tangent today, but I had one of my professors, well, it was a guest professor that I had when I was at Berkeley. She did her whole thesis, so this is way out, on just the parts of a building that you could touch. And it's amazing if you stop and think about the parts that you actually touch are very small. There's very little in a building you actually physically touch. You touch door handles, you touch, you know, window handles. There's very few things. And so thinking about architecture from that perspective is a really interesting way of thinking about it. So how important those objects that you actually interact with are versus what you see in the space you feel and that sort of thing. So it's just an interesting way of thinking about it. So anyway, most manufacturers have this kind of content for us to use. And it's in some variety of format. For our purposes today, using an AutoCAD drawing is not a bad place to start. So I have this downloaded. Let me show it in its folder. There it is. It's a zip file, so I need to extract it. I'll right-click to extract it. I'm going to extract all. It can go in the same folder. That's fine. There it is. And it looks like they gave me a casement and a radius casement. This is an awning style. This is a side opening style. I'll use that one. I could double click on it, in which case it would open up in AutoCAD and I could see what it would look like. It's not going to help too much to open it up in AutoCAD. It's just a way of previewing, oh, what does it look like? Does it look the way I think it's going to look? That sort of thing. There it is. And generally when you look at these, there's several different styles to the windows. And they'll give you these charts with their various sizes and what they look like in their various sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and open that file in Rhino. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. I just wanted to pull it up. I have Rhino already opened up, which my guess is most of you already have it opened up by now too. It's just a new large object inches file. That's what I'm going to bring this into. And when I go to my File menu, I'm going to go to File and then Insert. So I'm not inserting a block instance. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to go to File and Import. Sorry. I'm not going to Insert. I want to go to Import because I'm actually bringing the native drawing into my AutoCAD or into my Rhino file. The other thing is, by default, if I went to my downloads, I wouldn't see it listed here. There it is. Unless I had all compatible file types showing. Sometimes Rhino gets stuck with just Rhino files listed. So make sure that you choose all compatible file types, in which case I can pick my AutoCAD drawing, there it is, and say Open. In some rare instances, you'll find that your AutoCAD file is too new of a version for the Rhino that we have on these school computers, in which case you would need to open it and save it backwards. Most of the time, it's just fine. So these import options are all just fine. I'll go ahead and say OK. And it will then bring in that drawing that I had as part of my AutoCAD file. So I have all of these different options in here. There's a colonial. It has to do with the grid style there versus the prairie grid. The grids are optional anyway, so you could do it without. And the radius is referring to the top. I picked this window just for fun so that you could see how I'd make that radius. Okay? You could do something that was straight, which is obviously less challenging, and that would be fine for our purposes today. So at this point, I also need to pick what window do I actually want to do. Do I want to do a double casement where I have two windows that open? Do I want to do a single? What size do I pick? It's really entirely up to you as to what size you want to pick. But I need to start thinking about it in a little bit cleaner manner. So there's a 5-foot nominal window. So something in this row sounds pretty good. And let me see here. What do we got? 5 foot. We'll do it by 4 foot. I'll pick this window right here. And so I'm going to isolate that window out from the rest of these objects. So let me select just that window. There it is. I'm going to turn off Gumball. It's going to drive me nuts. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So I type copy or go up to transform and then copy. And I'll pull it outside of all the rest of these objects. That will then allow me to get rid of all the rest of these objects. I'll press the delete key. And there they go. And then I'll move these lines to point 0, 0, 0. And then enter, zoom, Z, followed by S for selected. There we are. I'm back at the origin, and I've gotten rid of all that other stuff. So I just took this piece of the drawing and kept that one piece. That's the only piece that I'm going to draw. Obviously, there's a bunch of different sizes of the window. I'm only drawing one today. So the next part of this is, I didn't look at my layers just yet. So guess what? AutoCAD's nasty, and it gives us lots of layers. We don't want that. So let me take all of these lines, and I could keep them if I wanted to, but I could also just drop them onto a layer. Let me change them to be on layer 7 here. I'll change object layer. Those are all on layer 7, which should allow me to delete the rest of these layers. So I'll hold down Shift and select them all. Those are the AutoCAD layers, and I'll delete. Yeah. So this is the problem. A block definition, blah, blah, blah. I can't delete the layer. Great. Let me go into Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. There's a bunch of blocks that came in with AutoCAD. Darn AutoCAD for being nasty, right? Let me select all of these, and I'll press Delete. Sweet, I'm feeling good. Guess what? There's 122 hidden or no blocked reference definitions in this file. Yeah, okay, show me all 122. Let's get rid of some more. I would recommend not deleting all of them at once and going in little groups so that you don't crash anything while you're doing the deletes. So I'm working my way down. The alternative solution would be to do this in AutoCAD. You could purge all the blocks in AutoCAD before you brought it in, but it depends on your comfort level in AutoCAD versus Rhino. So since this is a Rhino class, I'm showing you how to do it in Rhino. So there we go. There's no more hidden blocks. That's great. Now I can delete all of these extra layers. There we go. They're all gone. All remnants of AutoCAD is gone, except for the windows itself. So now I need to start thinking about how do I make this set of windows in the first place. And if it was a rectangular window, it wouldn't be too hard because I could essentially extrude some of the pieces. But since I have this curve, that gets a little bit more complicated. So what's the right strategy? I could do it in a variety of ways. I could create a profile and I could sweep the profile around my window. That would be an option. I could draw boxes and I could extrude those boxes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a large surface that fits this whole window, and then I'm going to break that surface into pieces and then extrude those pieces. To me, that's the easiest, simplest way of making it. So I'll start with a large rectangular surface, so rectangular plane corner to corner. I'll start in this lower corner. And I don't want to draw to that corner because it's not the whole window, so I'll use my smart tracking to get all the way to where those two meet. There we go. So now I have a surface right there that's as large as the window that I was working with. Now I'll take that surface and I'll split that surface with some of these other curves. So let me type split. This is also available under the Edit menu, Split, or Control-Shift-S. And it's asking me to select the object to split. Well, that'll be this big surface. I hit Enter, Control-Shift-S, or just type Split. Select the cutting objects. Okay, so I'm going to select the arcs, certainly, there. I'll select these interior curves there and there. I need the windows itself, and I'm going to hold off on all the grids for right now. I'm not going to split that part just yet. When I hit Enter, I will then have separate little pieces of the surface that represent different parts of the window. These upper two pieces I don't need. They can just be deleted. Now I can start to extrude these various pieces. But before I do the extrusions, I want to start thinking about my layers, because I can either change the layers after or I could change it as I work. And for me, it's easier to start changing the layers as I work. So I'm going to create a layer called Window. And then underneath that layer called Window, I'm going to create a layer for Trim. Underneath that layer called Window, I'll create a layer for Glass. And I'll create a layer for Frame, if I can type, which apparently I can't today. So I have Trim, I have Glass, and I have Frame as my 3 layers underneath. Obviously, if you need more layers, no problem in changing it. I'll take the pieces that will ultimately become the glass there, and I'll put them on the glass layer. So I'll right-click on Glass and say Change Object Layer. I'll take the pieces here and here that are going to be the frames, and I'll right-click on Frame and say Change Object Layer. I'll take the pieces that are going to become the trim. Actually, it's probably the jam, more accurately. And I'll right-click on that and say Change Object Layer. And so for technical purposes, I'll call this jam instead. So this layer, layer 7, is my AutoCAD base, for lack of something better to call it. And these other layers don't mean much at all, so I could end up deleting them. OK, so let's start with some basic extrusions. First off, I can take my jam, and that needs to be the thickness of the the window hole that I would be opening, so the thickness of the wall. So let me extrude, and I'm going to do extrude surface, not extrude curve, because I have a surface selected. So extrude SRF for surface. I'll hit enter. And now my extrusion distance is going to be the thickness of the wall. So I'll do 5.5 inches. That works. My direction is going to be set. I'll manually set it. Both sides, no. Do I want it to be solid? Yes. Do I want to delete the input? Do I want to keep that original surface? No, I don't need to keep that original surface. So yes, delete that original surface. The rest of the options are just fine. My extrusion distance, I'm going to go down for ease of doing this. I'll say negative 5.5, which would be the thickness of my wall, and I'll hit enter. That then creates that part of the window.
You said 5.5?
5.5. 5.5. Well, you can do 6. Do round numbers if you want. Do the same thing here with this piece. I'll extrude surface. So surface, extrude surface, where is it? Oh, you can tell I never actually select this from the list. How about extrude SRF? There it is. Same distance. We'll go down to right there. That's creating that part of the window. Now this next part, the frame, is probably recessed back a little bit. So let's move it. I type move, vertical, I don't know, by ½ inch, 0.5. Sorry, negative 0.5. So that then goes down a little bit. And then we could extrude those pieces. So extrude surface. And so maybe those are, I don't know, 1.5 inches. Negative 1.5 inches. There it is as its little frame. We'll do the same thing with this one. Negative 1.5, like that. My glass panels are too high as well, so let's take each glass panel. Let's move those vertically. And I'm just going to go from one of these corners to the middle of my frame. So there it is. And you can see that I'm rather quickly starting to build out the 3 dimensions of this window. Now, Rhino needs 2 surfaces, 2 planes to represent the glass. So I can't do just the single plane. I need 2 planes to represent the glass. So I'm going to offset the surface. So I'll type offset SRF for surface. And this time I'll do a distance. And we'll do, I don't know, let's do 0.25 inches. And we'll go through my options. My distance, my corner is fine. Solid. I don't want it to be solid anymore because I just need an extra surface. And I want both sides to yes, so it's going in both directions. Notice when I'm offsetting a surface, I get a bunch of arrows pointing out of the surface. That's so that I know which direction the offset is going to happen. So I have arrows pointing up, and I also, well, I don't have any arrows pointing down, but I'm doing both sides at the same time. Okay? So now that I've done that, when I hit enter, I will end up with a surface on top, a surface in the middle, and a surface at the bottom. And if I switched into ghosted mode, we could probably see all 3 of those surfaces. Yep, see 1, 2, and 3. I don't need the center, so I'll select that center and press delete. And now I have just 2 surfaces that represent that glass. So it was an offset surface, both sides. So I'll do the same thing over here with this one. Offset SRF for surface. Distance is still 1/4 inch. Solid is set to no. Solid means do I have edges on it? And because it's 2 planes of glass and it has a frame already around it, I don't need those. I just need the 2 planes. So that's why solid is set to no. Both sides are set to yes. Perfect. I'll go ahead and hit enter, which will give me the 3 planes. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 1 in the middle, there it is, and there's a 3rd one down below. There's the 3rd one. Right. We'll go ahead and just delete this middle pane. There we go. So now I have my window, pretty well set up. So I have my glass, I have my frame, and I have my, my jamb all the way around my window. Maybe it's time to add a little bit more trim around the window. So if I think about inserting this, remember we talked about blocks last class. So the idea here is you build the window as a block and you can then insert it into your scene multiple times. So if I thought about what do I want the trim to look like around this window on the outside and or on the inside, might be a good time to put that trim on too. So as I go forward from here, I'm going to throw different things at you. Doesn't mean that you have to do all these various things, because I'm just trying to show you different options. So let me go ahead and add that trim around the outside of the window. So adding the trim at the bottom would be relatively easy. All I need is a rectangle, and I could say this was at 5 feet, wasn't it? I think it was at 5 feet. So it would be at 5 feet, comma, negative 1.5 inches. And then my height would be up at, I don't know, let's extend this out by 2.5 inches, something like that. I'm making a little sill. This was supposed to be 4 feet, not 5 feet. I made a mistake there. It's a good place to introduce the concept of a scale one dimension. So just like in AutoCAD, you know how you can stretch an object? Rhino has the ability to scale 1D. So if we go up to transform and go to scale, there's 3 different scale options. There's a 1D, a 2D, and a 3D. 3D obviously scales the object as a whole. 2D says keep one of them the same, but scale the other 2 at the same time. And the third option, which is a scale 1D, says keep 2 of the directions the same, give me a scale on just 1. So I'll scale 1D, and I want to scale 1D this object. I'll hit enter, and I'm going to scale from here to there and make it match up to right there. So the idea here is that that's like a little sill on the bottom of the window. And then we'll do some trim that goes around this on the upper sides. So I could do the same thing with the box. I could start right there, and I'm going to go here. I'm just going to be a little bit wide for right now, and I'll use that scale 1D. This would be 1.5 inches thick. But I want to control how wide that is, so I'd scale 1D and say I really want that only to be 5.5 inches, for example. So there's one side of the trim. Not too bad. Then we get to the top. This one's not so fun. This is why I picked something that was more complicated. If it was a straight window, it'd be easy. Just put the trim across the top, call it a day, right? But this one's not. It's curved, so we get to have some more fun with it. So in this context, fun is a relative term, I know. So what I'm going to do is I want a curve that's right there at the top edge. And I don't currently have one. I have some surfaces, and I have a curve that goes all the way around, but I want just one along the top edge. So I'm going to use that concept of derivative geometry. Give me something from something that exists. To get this, I'll go to curve and then curve from objects. We did this on the first day of class, if you remember. Okay? Curve from objects. I'm going to duplicate an edge. And that will allow me to create a curve that's just right there. And I'll take one more that's just right there. So I've given myself this curve that runs right across the top of this object. And when I hit enter, it's actually still 2 curves, so I have to join them together. So I'll type join, or go up to edit join, or press Control J. And I have 2 curves joined into one open curve. There it is. Now I need to offset this curve to give me my distance. So I'll type offset. And this time, I don't have to type offset CRV because just regular offset assumes that it's a curve. When it's a surface, I have to type SRF. I'll hit enter. My distance is not 24. My distance was 5.5. And I'm making up these numbers based on practice. If yours is 6 inches or it's 10 inches, or it's your choice. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to critique how big your trim is on your window, right? Though, as a side note, I'm going to get on tangents today. Today's just a day of tangents. So I was going through the planning department or the design review process in the city of Lafayette on this project that I was working on, and this just shows you how important trim can be. Okay, and so we were in a hearing. This was one of 10 public hearings trying to get this project approved, and the commissioners decided to spend 30 minutes arguing over the thickness of the window trim. Yep. They said, and I quote, this is in a public hearing, they said, "We don't want your flimsy 1x trim in our city because it looks too much like a track house." And this is a quote in the meeting. It was crazy. And it was all I could do. Like you can't talk in these hearings because they're all in their little thing talking and you're just there observing. It's ridiculous. It was all I could do to say, "You didn't read the plans. It's not 1x trim, it's 2x trim." Like if you had just read the plans, you could see that it's 2x. Anyway, so the point is that these kinds of things can end up really mattering long term. In this class, doesn't matter. You can make it however big you want, okay? But just be aware. I like to throw that out there so you're thinking about these kinds of things. Anyway, my offset distance is 5.5 inches. There it is. What? Oh, totally. They can watch it. They can watch it. After that process, they can watch it. I am not hiding from it. Okay, so there we are. So there's my offset. So I gave myself those two curves that are representative of this upper part of the window. And so now I have to think a little bit about how am I going to join this part of the window together. It's a little bit nasty, right? So let's say I want this curve to continue until it comes down to here. I'll use my line tool, my polyline tool, and I'll draw a line from this point just going straight up, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I have this arc and I have this arc. I could extend this arc to come and meet that arc, or I could use the fillet tool. Okay, this is one of my tricks. So I'll use fillet, but I'll set my radius. You can see by default for my computer it's set at 0. I'll set my radius at 0 so there won't be an arc at all. It'll be a sharp corner. So my radius is set to 0, and I can say I want this curve to come meet that curve. And it gives me that nice sharp point. Right? So now I can come in and I can connect that together. I haven't dealt with the other side just yet, so let's take this curve, let's mirror it. That's available under Transform and then Mirror. I'm going to go to the middle of this. There's the middle. I can hold down Shift so that it stays in a line. That doesn't look like it's the right spot. Mirror, I picked the wrong mirror plane. Should be from that middle. There we go. Hold down Shift or turn on Ortho either way. And I'll fill it one more time from this to that, and that gives me that sharp edge. So I have this, this, that. I need another line that goes from here to there. And I don't think I have a line that goes from there to there. So now I have this and this and this. I have that, that, and that. There's my piece of wood at the top of my window. So I'll go ahead and join those together. I'll type join. Then I'm going to extrude curve. Come on, extrude curve. I want to make sure that it's solid. Both sides is set to no. And I could type in 1.5 inches, or I could snap to this existing piece of trim that I have. And there it is. Let me take this piece and let me mirror that over to this side. I'll type mirror. That's also available under Transform and then Mirror. Either way. Oops. One more time. We'll mirror across that window. I'll hold down Shift to keep it in a line. And now I have the outside of the window with a little windowsill. It probably needs a little piece of trim under that little windowsill. So let's add one more little bit of trim there. We'll go from, well, in reality, those would extend down a little bit more. So let's do it right here. Oh, come on. This is at 4 feet, comma, negative 3. And we'll do it at 1.5 inches. There we go. And I'm going to make these extend down. So let me scale 1D from there to there, and I'll pull that down. Same thing from here. Scale 1D, so it's transform, scale, scale 1D. And we'll go from there down to there. And so that essentially builds out the outside of my window. If I wanted to put some trim on the inside of the window, I could do something similar and put some trim on the inside of the window. You guys don't need to sit and watch me put the trim on the inside of the window. It's all the same techniques that I just did. Now, before I can actually use this object, though, we have to start talking about materials and texture mapping and layer structure and all the rest of it. So because we just covered texture mapping, guess what? Now that applies. So we have to make sure we do that too. OK, so first off, obviously, the window isn't going to lay flat in space. So it needs to come up. So we need to do a rotate 3D on this object. So I will select the whole object, and I'll go up to transform rotate 3D, or type rotate 3D. And I want to rotate this object along some kind of a plane. And I'll just pick the bottom of my window trim. That's fine. I want to go out in the Y direction here. Since ortho's not on, I keep holding shift today to do that. That's fine. Or I could turn ortho on either way. And then I will go up in space. I'll hold down shift to jump to that 90 degrees. And now my window is vertical in space, which is obviously the way it would go into the building ultimately anyway. So there it is. It would help, though, as I started to create this, if you think about putting this window into a hole that was in a wall, where I'm inserting and snapping to makes a difference. So this point right there, right here, is probably the hole in the window on the outside. So let me take that point and move it to 0.00 for when I bring it in later. So let me take this, move 0, 0, 0. And now when I insert that as in a block, I can pick just the outside corner, outside lower corner of